Although it's basically impossible to have a conversation about Scientology these days without tons of mockery, that wasn't always the case. Not because it was a much more respected institution at any other point, but because most people didn't really know what it was all about. I remember seeing Dianetics commercials on TV as a kid and being intrigued by the alluring graphics and the cryptic promises, but if you asked me what it was actually about, I couldn't tell you. And at that point in time, most people's awareness of Scientology was limited to commercials like that and solicitors in the streets and subway stations. People by and large just weren't aware of things like Xenu or Thetans or any of the church's more serious controversies. But the public's consciousness of Scientology began to grow more as a bunch of very popular celebrities started to join. In particular, Tom Cruise became one of their most outspoken advocates. But in the early 2000s, people's eyebrows began to raise as Tom Cruise's public appearances became more erratic, and he started to make much more controversial statements. Like that time in 2004 when he said that psychiatry should be abolished and he came at Brooke Shields for using antidepressants. That moment made a lot of people more aware of Scientology's opposition to mainstream mental health care. And although he did get a lot of criticism for that, what really pushed things to the next level was this Oprah appearance.
He's in the building! Yes, yes! That's why you're here? About
This appearance primed the internet to make fun of Tom Cruise, and it led to what I consider to be one of the greatest YTMNDs of all time. Tom Cruise kills Oprah. And with that Oprah appearance, you can see people start making the connection between Tom Cruise's nuttiness and Scientology, but it would take another push for Scientology to become the laughingstock of the internet. And that push would come with the 12th episode of the 9th season of South Park, entitled Trapped in the Closet. This episode of South Park was essentially a half hour of mockery directed at Tom Cruise and the Church of Scientology. This episode also served the purpose of, for the first time, exposing the general public to the inner workings of Scientology's belief system. You probably remember the parts of the episode captioned with, "This is what Scientologists actually believe." So the episode winds up being a massive success and is to this day still regarded as one of the best episodes ever. It also had the effect of alienating one of its main stars, Isaac Hayes, who himself was a member of the Church of Scientology. There is a place in this world for satire, but there is a time when satire ends and intolerance and bigotry towards religious beliefs of others begins. The 63-year-old Hayes said in a statement issued earlier Monday, "Religious beliefs are sacred to people, and at all times should be respected and honored," Hayes said. "As a civil rights activist of the past 40 years, I cannot support a show that disrespects those beliefs and practices." This clash between South Park and Isaac Hayes got a lot of attention in the news, bringing the debate over Scientology into the mainstream even more than it had ever been before. So now, even though South Park already had a massive audience, you had people who didn't even watch the show taking a look. And right away, the episode spawns tons of memes, tons of mockery directed towards Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard on the internet. And in particular, YTMND, You're the Man Now Dog, becomes a major hub of anti-Scientology content. You have a lot of people making sites that are basically clips from the episode of South Park, and then you also have a lot of people making sites that are basically just making fun of L. Ron Hubbard and whatnot. Well, this was something that it was very likely the community would have gotten over it quickly enough and just moved on to the next thing. But then, the Church of Scientology did the thing you don't do when you want something to go away. They issued a legal threat. Church of Scientology sends a cease and desist. Dear Legal, our office represents the L. Ron Hubbard Library, the owner of the copyrights to a number of photographs of Mr. L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of the Scientology religion. We also represent the Church of Scientology International, CSI, the owner of the copyright in the graphic image file depicting the Scientology logo website, Scientology.org. CSI is also the exclusive licensee of the trademarks and service marks of the Scientology religion, blah blah blah, and then they make a list of copyright infringing YTMND sites that have various logos, pictures of L. Ron Hubbard and whatnot. Fair use be damned, they demand that they all be taken down. And if you've seen my video about YTMND versus E-Bomb's World, you already know that YTMND's owner, Max Goldberg, was not one to take legal threats lying down. Rather than caving to the Church of Scientology's demands, what Max did was he changed the front page of YTMND.com to now include a Scientology sites section, which of course encouraged users to make even more sites about Scientology. And while there was a lot of fun and jokes and mockery to be had, things took a more serious turn when Smooth Media uploaded this site. The Unfunny Truth About Scientology. In The Unfunny Truth About Scientology, Smooth Media takes a detour from making fun of the sillier aspects of their religion to focus on their more serious controversies. These controversies include things like attempts to infiltrate the government, a fair game policy, which basically grants members of the church permission to silence dissenters by any means necessary. And most importantly, it drew attention to the Lisa Mcpherson case. Lisa Mcpherson was a longtime Scientology member who was very, very involved in the church. Over the years, she had invested thousands of dollars of her own money into the church's various programs. And in 1995, after being involved in a minor car accident, she was found walking naked in the streets. After she was found, she was brought to a nearby hospital to see a psychiatrist, and if you remember, Scientologists do not like psychiatry. So members of the Church of Scientology arrive at the hospital they brought her to, meet up with her, and she winds up checking herself out and leaving with them. She said she was going for religious care, and eventually this religious care with the church went south. And then rather than taking her to the closest hospital, they went much further to get to a hospital who had a Scientologist doctor on staff. When they got there, she was pronounced dead, and it had been found that she was starving, dehydrated, bruised, and bitten by cockroaches. And I'm not going to show the photos they took when they got her to the hospital, but suffice it to say that it's a far cry from the woman you see in these pictures. After this happened, the Church of Scientology was indicted on 2 felony charges, but those were eventually dropped. However, years later, Lisa Mcpherson's family filed a civil suit that they wound up settling out of court for undisclosed terms. And although the Lisa Mcpherson case was already very well known to a small group of anti-Scientologist activists, this was the first time it was ever getting this kind of mainstream exposure. Not only was it the top site on all of YTMND, which at this time was approaching its peak of popularity, but mainstream websites were picking it up. So essentially, by issuing impotent legal threats to YTMND, they wound up shining a light on one of their biggest scandals ever. And you know what? They never even followed up on those threats they made. Most of the sites they listed are still there to this very day. But the damage wasn't done yet for the Church of Scientology, because in 2008, 4chan picked up where YTMND left off. And although 4chan raids up until this point took place almost entirely online, their activities were starting to bleed out into the real world more frequently. In particular, there was a several-month trolling campaign of white supremacist radio host Hal Turner that had culminated in an IRL raid. Granted, this particular raid wound up having something like 2 people show up, and it wasn't that big of a deal, but it started to get people to have a taste for it. And although things like the Hal Turner raids were mostly just for the sake of laughing at idiots, there were people in the community who saw the potential to affect real change in the world. And on January 15th, 2008, 4chan's biggest raid to date was born. I think it's time for B to do something big. People need to understand not to fuck with B and talk about nothing for 10 minutes and expect people to give their money to an organization that makes absolutely no fucking sense. I'm talking about hacking or taking down the official Scientology website. It's time to use our resources to do something we believe is right. It's time to do something big again, B. Talk amongst one another, find a better place to plan it, and then carry out what can and must be done. It's time, B. And this poster follows up with a link to a Gawker article about a Tom Cruise indoctrination video that Scientology tried to have taken off the internet.
I think it's a privilege to call yourself a Scientologist, and it's something that you have to earn.
In his mind, showing this would get more people behind his cause, but actually the response was a bit mixed. In fact, this very moment was one of the key origins of one of the biggest cultural divides on both 4chan and the internet at large. Older users who had typically been more into the idea of trolling for its own sake, mocking stupidity for laughs, and generally doing it for the lulz, were at odds with a wave of newer cause-oriented 4chan users. People who thought that they could use 4chan's powers for good. A cultural divide that permeates the internet to this very day. But despite some internal conflicts, there were enough people on board to start getting the ball rolling. And the next day, a follow-up post was made. On 15/108, war was beginning. Scientology's site is already under heavy bombardment. It's loading quite slowly, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, the first assault in many to follow. We're winning a minor victory, but without the united support of the Chans, Scientology will brush off this attack, and it will be doomed to nothing more than an entry in ED. 4chan, answer the call. Join the legion against Scientology. Help in its demise, in its long-awaited doom. For decades, this tyranny has existed, corrupting the minds of the weak. Although hilarious, it's rather pathetic. We must destroy this evil, and replace it with a greater one. Chanology. For when we are victorious, the Chans will stand united in a new chapter of anonymous existence and batshit insanity. We will have begun our world takeover. If we can destroy Scientology, we can destroy whatever we like. The world will be but our plaything. Do the right thing, 4chan. Become not just a part of this war, become an epic part of it. The largest of the Chans, you hold the key of manpower, what the Legion is in desperate need of. Forward, Anonymous United. We, the Legion, are unstoppable. TLDR, we're taking down Scientology. Join up or GTFO. And then a video declaring war on Scientology was released.
Hello, leaders of Scientology. We are anonymous. Over the years, we have been watching you. Your campaigns of misinformation, your suppression of dissent, your litigious nature, all of these things have caught our eye. With the leakage of your latest propaganda video into mainstream circulation, the extent of your malign influence over those who have come to trust you as leaders has been made clear to us. Anonymous has therefore decided that your organization should be destroyed.
Scientology websites were taken down with DDoS attacks, pizzas were sent to Scientology locations, endless black faxes were sent to drain their printer ink. 4chan users were actually doing a little bit of damage to Scientology, however, after the news picked up on the story, questions about legality started to be raised. And that was when Mark Bunker, an anti-Scientology activist working for the Lisa Mcpherson Trust, who would eventually become known as Wise Beard Man, came into the picture. He released a video addressing 4chan users trying to help focus their efforts.
Hi, this is Mark Bunker from Xenu TV. I've been hearing from a lot of members of Anonymous and a lot of other people asking me, well, what do you think about Anonymous? First off, I think it's incredibly exciting to have an army of young, passionate people wanting to do something about Scientology's fraud and abuse. It really is exciting. However, I think you're making some major mistakes that are going to hurt in the long run. I looked at your site the other day and I saw that there were suggestions that people go to the orgs and put bleach in the gas tanks of cars parked outside the orgs, or cut the wires underneath the cars, or go inside the building and flush rubber gloves down the toilets to plug up the sewer systems. These are just wrong. They're morally and legally, and it's going to tar the entire group of you if you push for these type of things. And I see those particular tactics are down. But you're still attacking Scientology's website. As critics, we prefer to have it remain up because it is so wild-eyed and defamatory that no one can take it seriously. It does more damage to Scientology when it's up than it does when it's down. But a better way to attack them would be try to get rid of their tax-exempt status. That's going to hurt them. Going out on the street and protesting, handing out leaflets. I saw a couple people in a video in Manhattan the other day who were doing that. Wonderful. That's wonderful. Speak out, be strong, and do it smart. Don't do things that are illegal. I wish you luck, and please, please, please reform your group the way we want Scientology to reform their group. Life will be wonderful. Thanks so much. I'll see you at Xenu TV.
And taking Mark's advice under consideration, real-life protests began to be planned. And then on January 27th, 2008, a video called Call to Action was released.
Be very wary of the 10th of February. Anonymous invites you to join us in an act of solidarity. Anonymous invites you to take up the banner of free speech, of human rights, of family and freedom. Join us in protest outside of Scientology centers worldwide. We are Anonymous. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We will be heard. Expect us.
With a time and date set, momentum behind the protest movement began to grow, and the Church of Scientology was taking these plans very seriously. On February 7th, 3 days prior to the protest, they issued their own statement. This weekend, we do anticipate that some members of this group, Anonymous, will turn up, as they have announced. We take this seriously because of the nature of the threats this group has made publicly. We will take every step necessary to protect our parishioners and staff as well as members of the community, in coordination with the local authorities. As to our knowledge of the organizers of the event, they are cyber terrorists who hide their identities behind masks and computer anonymity. Long before selecting Scientology as its latest target, anonymous hackers crashed the Fox website and issued a perverse manifesto in a July 2007 video message on the internet. We are the face of chaos. We ruin the lives of other people simply because we can. Hundreds die in a plane crash. We laugh. The nation mourns over school shooting. We laugh. We're the embodiment of humanity with no remorse, no caring, no love, or no sense of morality. Anonymous is perpetrating religious hate crimes against churches of Scientology and individual Scientologists for no reason other than religious bigotry. Anonymous initially justified its attacks by claiming that the church's requests to some websites to remove a stolen video of an internal church event somehow constituted an affront to free speech. In fact, the church, as would any copyright owner, had simply sent notices that the video constituted a copyright violation. Similar notices are sent daily by the television and recording industries, as well as the media to those who display pirated, copyrighted works. Anonymous' alleged free speech justification is belied by the fact that the video in question has been seen by millions. It is Anonymous that has repeatedly attempted to suppress free speech through illegal assaults on church websites so as to prevent internet users from obtaining information from the church. They have also engaged in other harassment, including threats of violence in telephone calls, fax transmissions, and emails, not to mention the anonymous mailing of white powder to dozens of our churches, requiring the services of law enforcement. Anonymous's claims of altruistic purposes are no different than those heard from any terrorist or hate group. We are not the first to be targeted. Using Scientology's prominence, Anonymous hopes to garner more attention. Anonymous has publicly proclaimed its guiding materials to be the Communist Manifesto and Mein Kampf. Quite obviously, this group is not just anti-Scientology, it is anti-freedom of religion, anti-free speech, and anti-American. Religious bigotry of any nature is deplorable and profoundly affects the entire community. The hate crimes of Anonymous should be condemned. So as you can see, the Church of Scientology was a bit concerned about what might happen, or at the very least, simply wanted to court public opinion in their favor. But would people actually show up to these protests? You have so many cases where people talk big online, then the time comes to do something in real life and they don't show up. Would Project Chanology turn out to be as big as it was hyped up to be, or would it be just another internet flop?
A war between two area churches brought their fight to the street today. Members of the Church of the Anonymous marched outside the Church of Scientology on Osceola Avenue in downtown Clearwater.
February 10th came and thousands of Anons showed up to Scientology locations around the globe. Large groups of 4chan users, mostly in Guy Fawkes masks, mobbed locations of Scientology churches in major cities. Not only was the original call to protest a massive success, but every month after they would have another successful protest against the Church of Scientology. The church did try to fight back with doxing and legal threats, and in some cases, actual successful indictments. But by and large, Project Chanology was actually very successful in making the general populace more aware about what Scientology is actually about and shifting public opinion more against them. But was any lasting damage done, or is it something that people became aware of for a moment and then kind of moved on to the next thing? Scientology's membership numbers actually did hold strong for a fairly long time after these events happened. However, today, Scientology is currently experiencing its largest decline in membership ever. And on top of that, one of President Trump's former aides in 2017 said that he is in favor of removing their tax-exempt status. That tax-exempt status has always been one of the biggest targets of people who were against Scientology. And of course, we can't chalk all of this up to protests and online shitposting. There's a number of factors here. We also have the fact that over the past few years, a number of high-profile celebrities who were Scientologists have left the church and even spoken out against it. In particular, you had Leah Remini basically doing an anti-Scientology PR tour and writing an expose about them, which I'll link in the description. And on top of Scientology having its own problems, religions as a whole have been experiencing declining numbers the past few years. But despite all those factors, I can't help but think that the tide wouldn't have shifted against Scientology so severely had they simply not decided to pick a fight with the internet. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, check out this other video about YTMND versus E-Bombs World. I'm out.